polite things you do that rich people secretly hate. Have you ever walked away from a conversation with someone wealthy wondering if you said something wrong? Maybe you were trying to be respectful, humble, or polite, but what if some of those well-intentioned behaviors were actually creating distance instead of connection? And what if the biggest mistake isn't what you're saying, but the psychology behind why you're saying it? Most people approach this topic as if it's about learning the rules of etiquette around rich people. That's not what this video is about. This is about understanding the psychology of status, self-worth, and money. Once you recognize these hidden patterns, you'll stop feeling intimidated by wealth, become more authentic in every interaction, carry yourself with greater confidence, and build relationships based on mutual respect instead of silent insecurity. Putting rich people on a pedestal. Why do so many people walk away from conversations with wealthy people feeling like they didn't make the impression they hoped for? Could the problem be something you're doing before the conversation even begins? The first mistake is putting rich people on a pedestal. The moment you believe someone's bank account makes them more important than you, the entire interaction changes. You stop speaking as an equal and start performing for their approval. Instead of connecting with a person, you're reacting to the idea of wealth. But if you don't consciously think rich people are better than you, how do you know you're doing it? It shows up in subtle ways. You laugh harder than you normally would. You agree with opinions you don't actually share. You apologize too often. You become overly polite because you're afraid of saying the wrong thing. What feels like respect is often intimidation wearing the mask of good manners. So why does this matter? Wouldn't wealthy people appreciate being treated with extra respect? Respect is one thing. Putting someone above yourself is another. Most successful people spend enough time around people who want something from them. What often stands out isn't the person who tries the hardest to impress them. It's the person who's comfortable enough to be genuine. Confidence creates connection. Intimidation creates distance. The irony is that the more you elevate someone's status in your mind, the less they'll ever get to know the real you. But putting someone on a pedestal doesn't stay in your mind for very long. It quickly changes the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, and even the way you think. So why do otherwise confident people suddenly become nervous around someone with money? That's the next polite habit rich people secretly notice. Acting nervous around rich people. Have you ever noticed how your personality changes the moment you're talking to someone with money? Why do confident people suddenly become nervous, awkward, or overly careful around wealthy individuals? It happens because nervousness is often the natural consequence of putting someone on a pedestal. Once you've decided that someone's wealth makes them more important than you, your brain treats the interaction as high stakes. Suddenly, every word matters, every silence feels uncomfortable. You're no longer having a conversation, you're trying not to make a mistake. But how can you tell if you're acting nervous without even realizing it? It usually shows up in subtle ways. You overthink everything you say, you laugh at jokes that aren't that funny, you agree too quickly, you avoid expressing opinions that might create disagreement, you become so focused on making a good impression that you stop being yourself. Ironically, the harder you try to be liked, the less authentic you become. So what's the alternative? Should you pretend not to care that they're wealthy? Not at all. The goal isn't to ignore someone's success. It's to remember that success doesn't change human nature. Wealthy people still appreciate honesty, confidence, and genuine conversation. The people who stand out aren't the ones trying to impress them. They're the ones who remain comfortable enough to be themselves. Real confidence isn't acting fearless, it's refusing to let another person's success determine your own sense of worth. But acting nervous isn't the habit that does the most damage. There's another behavior that almost always follows, and because it feels polite, most people never question it. Ironically, it's often the very thing that causes others to respect you less. Constantly downplaying yourself. Why do so many people feel the need to make themselves seem smaller around someone who's wealthy? Why do they instinctively downplay their intelligence, accomplishments, or ambitions instead of simply owning them? Because when you believe someone else's success makes them more valuable than you, shrinking yourself feels like the polite thing to do. You hear it in everyday conversations. I'm just an average guy. I could never do what you do. I'm probably wasting your time. Those statements sound humble, but they're often rooted in insecurity rather than humility. But isn't humility supposed to be a good thing? So what's wrong with being modest? True humility doesn't require you to diminish yourself. There's a difference between being humble and constantly discrediting your own value. Humility says, I'm confident, but I'm still learning. Insecurity says, I'm not good enough to be here. When you repeatedly minimize yourself, you quietly teach other people to see you the same way. Real confidence allows you to acknowledge another person's success without pretending you have none of your own. So how do confident people handle conversations with successful people without sounding arrogant? They stop comparing. They don't compete. They don't apologize for who they are. they simply show up as themselves. The most memorable people aren't the loudest or the most impressive. They're the ones who are comfortable enough to speak honestly, ask thoughtful questions, and contribute to the conversation without trying to prove their worth. Confidence isn't thinking you're better than someone else. It's knowing you don't have to be less. You might think that once you stop putting yourself down, you're in the clear. But there's another polite habit that can undo everything you've gained. It's so common that most people don't even notice they're doing it, and once you see it, you'll never have another conversation the same way again. Walking on eggshells. Have you ever found yourself going out of your way to prove you're not interested in someone's money? Why do so many people feel the need to reassure wealthy people of something that was never even questioned? Because when you fear losing someone's approval, honesty becomes a risk. Instead of speaking naturally, you begin editing yourself. You avoid topics that might create disagreement. You nod along with opinions you don't actually believe. You smile when you'd rather ask a question. It feels like the polite thing to do, but in reality, you're sacrificing authenticity for acceptance. But isn't avoiding conflict the respectful thing to do? Wouldn't wealthy people appreciate someone who's easy to get along with? There's a big difference between being respectful and being agreeable. Respect means listening, staying composed, and treating someone with dignity, even when you disagree. Agreeableness, on the other hand, often comes from a fear of rejection. When every response is designed to keep the other person happy, the conversation starts to feel predictable and guarded. Ironically, people tend to trust those who are willing to express honest thoughts respectfully, not those who agree with everything they say. So how do confident people disagree without creating tension or appearing disrespectful? They stop seeing disagreement as conflict. Confident people understand that different opinions don't damage strong relationships, they strengthen them. They ask thoughtful questions, they explain their perspective calmly, and they're comfortable letting someone disagree with them without taking it personally. The goal isn't to win the conversation, it's to be real enough that the other person knows exactly who they're talking to. You may think that speaking honestly is the hardest part. It isn't. The real challenge begins after you've found your voice. That's when many people feel the need to overcompensate, constantly trying to prove they have no interest in someone else's money. It sounds harmless, even admirable, but it's often the very thing that makes the interaction feel unnatural. Trying too hard to prove you're not after their money. Have you ever found yourself going out of your way to prove you're not interested in someone's money? Why do so many people feel the need to reassure wealthy people of something that was never even questioned? Because when you're worried about being judged, you start trying to control how other people see you. You might refuse a generous offer before they've even insisted. You might repeatedly say, "I'm not like everyone else," or "I'm not here for your money." It feels honest, but it often has the opposite effect. Instead of creating trust, it draws unnecessary attention to money and makes the interaction feel forced. But if your intentions are genuine, shouldn't you make them clear? Your behavior speaks louder than your reassurance. People don't build trust because you tell them you're trustworthy. They build trust because your actions consistently reflect your character. The more you try to convince someone that your motives are pure, the more it can sound like you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist. Confidence doesn't feel the need to make repeated declarations. It simply behaves consistently over time. So what should you do instead if you're talking to someone who's wealthy? Treat them the same way you'd treat anyone else. Accept kindness without turning it into a debate. Be grateful without feeling indebted. Let your character reveal itself naturally instead of trying to manage someone else's perception of you. The strongest impression you can make isn't convincing someone you're different, it's making them forget they ever needed to think about your motives in the first place. You might think that once you've stopped trying to prove your intentions, you've finally learned how to interact confidently with wealthy people. But there's one more polite habit that quietly changes the entire relationship. It feels respectful, it feels appropriate, yet it's one of the quickest ways to stop having a genuine conversation. Most people mistake it for admiration when, in reality, it creates distance instead of connection. Treating rich people like celebrities. Why do so many people completely change the way they interact with someone the moment they discover they're wealthy? Why does admiration so often turn into fascination? Because many people stop seeing the person and start seeing the money. Instead of having a normal conversation, they become captivated by success. Every accomplishment sounds extraordinary, every opinion carries extra weight. Every story becomes more interesting simply because it's coming from someone with wealth. It feels like admiration, but it quietly sends another message. Your money makes you more important than me. But isn't admiration a good thing? Why would anyone dislike being admired? Because admiration becomes uncomfortable when it replaces authenticity. Imagine having every conversation revolve around your money, your business, or your success. Eventually people stop talking to you like a human being and start talking to the image they've created in their minds. Most people don't enjoy being reduced to a single characteristic. Wealthy people are no different. They still want conversations about ideas, experiences, humor, family, and life, not constant reminders of how much money they have. So how do you admire someone's success without treating them like a celebrity? Separate their achievements from their identity. You can respect what someone has built without assuming they're extraordinary in every area of life. You can appreciate their success without seeking their approval, and you can learn from them without forgetting your own worth. The strongest connections happen when two people meet as equals, not when one person becomes the fan and the other becomes the attraction. You may think treating wealthy people like celebrities is the biggest mistake you can make. It isn't. Every habit we've talked about so far is only a symptom of something much deeper. There's one belief that's been controlling every conversation you've ever had with someone wealthier than you. Until you uncover it, these habits will keep coming back in different forms. Believing their wealth determines their worth. What if every polite habit we've covered in this video wasn't the real problem? What if they were all symptoms of one belief that's been shaping your behavior without you ever realizing it? That belief is this: their wealth determines their worth. And, by comparison, mine. The moment you accept that belief, everything else happens automatically. You put wealthy people on a pedestal. You become nervous around them. You downplay yourself. You walk on eggshells. You treat them like celebrities. None of those behaviors exist on their own. They're all consequences of believing money changes a person's value. But if money doesn't determine someone's worth, then what does? Money measures value in the marketplace, not value as a human being. It can buy comfort, opportunity, and freedom. It can reflect discipline, skill, or good decisions. But it doesn't make someone more deserving of respect than someone with less money. The wealthiest person in the room can still be insecure. The poorest person in the room can still possess incredible character. The mistake is confusing someone's financial success with their human value. So how do you finally break free from this mindset and start interacting with wealthy people naturally? Stop measuring yourself against another person's bank account. Respect success without worshiping it. Learn from successful people without surrendering your confidence. And remember that every meaningful relationship begins the same way, with two human beings meeting as equals. The moment you stop seeing wealth as a measure of personal worth, you'll stop seeking approval, stop shrinking yourself, and stop feeling intimidated by success. Instead, you'll speak with authenticity, carry yourself with quiet confidence, and build stronger relationships with everyone, not just wealthy people. The irony is that the people who leave the strongest impression on the wealthy usually aren't the ones trying the hardest to impress them. They're the ones who understand a simple truth. Money may change a person's circumstances, but it never changes their humanity. And once you truly believe that, you'll never have to wonder whether you're saying the right thing again. The biggest lesson from this video isn't really about wealthy people, it's about the beliefs you carry into every conversation. Once you stop tying someone's bank account to their value, you'll naturally become more confident, more authentic, and far more memorable. But those beliefs don't appear out of nowhere. They're usually built on ideas about money we've accepted as truth for years, even though many of them are completely false. That's exactly what I uncover in my other video, Totally Wrong Facts Everyone Still Believes About Money. If you want to stop sabotaging your financial future by believing things that simply aren't true, click the video on your screen now. You may discover that the biggest thing holding you back isn't a lack of money, it's the myths you've believed about it your entire life.